Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. We're here with Patricia Jimenez with the Raul Jimenez Thanksgiving Dinner, talking about turkey. And we just got finished talking about President Abraham Lincoln and his proclamation about making Thanksgiving a national holiday. And what does that remind you of?
Well, I just think we're so grateful that President Abraham Lincoln, established that holiday because it brings people together. It brings everyone together, but there's fellowship, but there's also, his intention was for everyone to, in Thanksgiving for your blessings, which also ties in with being appreciative for God's graces, to come together.
Amen.
And yes, amen. And what I was mentioning earlier was that, we take it for granted sometimes, but not everybody celebrates Thanksgiving. And I think it's beautiful that we live here in America and that this tradition was started, because I know people come to this country and they've never had anything like this.
Somebody told you that one time.
Yes, a lady from Mexico came to donate her time because she was curious to know what it was all about. And then she said, this is amazing. In Mexico, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. And it opened my eyes because I just assumed everybody celebrated Thanksgiving. So I think we're very blessed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abraham Lincoln, for that.
Something else that it made me think about was when Jesus fed the 5,000. So that was from the book of Matthew, verses, what chapter was that? I'm not sure what chapter. But it says, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." And Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." So I thought that was sort of like maybe what your dad envisioned with feeding people and bringing them to get together. These people were gathering to see Jesus. And when you meet for Thanksgiving, like you were saying, it's a time of thanksgiving for the blessings in our lives. And so it's kind of like the same thing to me.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those holidays where people don't feel the stress. Like, I believe that Christmas is a beautiful holiday and for what it represents, but when people start to make it too commercialized, people forget about the real reason for Christmas, the birth of Christ. And so this is a holiday where people don't feel like stressed about having to give the perfect gift and spending money on this and that.
Right. Instead, they stress about the turkey.
Making sure it tastes good, right?
Right.
Yes. But I think it's a wonderful time for people, like you say, to come together, and it's named perfectly Thanksgiving, to say, I'm grateful and I want to, honor God and thank him and pass along a little to somebody who may not have and may be in need at that moment.
Right. So as part of our legacy segment, I wanted to talk about the presidential pardon of turkeys.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy?
Okay.
Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
Everybody knows that the turkey gets pardoned at the White House, right?
Yes.
Have you heard that?
Oh yeah, I've seen a couple news clips about it.
Right. So I got interested in why does that happen, and there's an article on a historical website of presidential happenings, and it wasn't always a pardon It wasn't meant to be that, really. It's just so happened that some presidents would eat the turkey and some wouldn't. And so they kind of, the news media turned it into a pardon. But here are some of the presidents, what they said. John F. Kennedy was said to have pardoned a turkey in 1963 when he said, "Let's keep him going." So that was his way of saying, I'm not going to eat this turkey. But even before that, in 1948, President Truman accepted 2 turkeys and remarked that they would come in handy for Christmas dinner. So it's thought that President Truman did not pardon his turkeys, which was funny to me. The Washington Post in 1963 used both the word pardon and the word reprieve in an article talking about President John F. Kennedy's comment about the turkey, "Let's keep him going." During the later years of the Nixon presidency, Patricia Nixon accepted turkeys on behalf of the president, and in 1973 sent the turkey to the Oxon Hill Children's Farm. So that was a way of pardoning that turkey. And in 1978, the turkey was presented to First Lady Rosalind Carter when she sent the turkey to Evans Farm Inn to live in a mini zoo. Then in 1981, the practice of sending the presentation turkey to a farm became the norm under President Ronald Reagan. The turkey ceremony also became a source of satire and humor for reporters. And so when President H.W. Bush in 1989 came to the same type of event on TV, there were animal rights activists picketing outside the White House. So President George H.W. Bush said, quote, "But let me assure you, and this fine Tom turkey, that he will not end up on anyone's dinner table. Not this guy. He's granted a presidential pardon as of right now and allow him to live out his days on a children's farm not far from here." So that's the history of presidential pardons.
Wow. I imagine after one president decided to pardon because they chose not to, kill it, it was very hard for anybody else to want to do that, right?
Right, especially in modern times.
Yes.
Okay, so before I started talking about presidential pardon, you mentioned a legacy of coming together. So it's very easy to see that this was your father's legacy of having the dinner. But what other type of legacies does this bring to mind for you? For example, I wanted to say for the listeners what some good definitions of legacy are. And one that I read just recently on Twitter was very inspiring to me. Mark Landers and Rob Rose, who are founders of The Winning Difference, said that good players leave behind memories, banners, and trophies. Great players leave behind a culture, values, and standards that create a sustainable advantage each year. So I thought that was a good way to explain legacy to athletes.
Yes.
So tell me about what comes to mind.
Well, my dad, he lived by this saying, "We come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. What counts is what we do in between. I believe in caring and sharing." And so, I mean, sometimes people think a legacy has to be really big, like you have to win the Nobel Peace Prize or
right.
something monumental. But, touching somebody's heart, being there to support someone, doing God's work, even if it appears small to you, but for somebody it might be life-changing or provide hope for that extra day that they're having trouble dealing with. It just means that you did the right thing even when nobody was looking.
Right.
Or there was no you weren't needing to be accountable to anybody.
My dad always said that's integrity, what you do when no one's looking.
Absolutely.
But he also said somebody's always looking.
Yes. I believe God is always looking, but I feel like we have to take pride and say, I'm responsible for myself, and to say I want to strive for that. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're not close to being like Jesus, but to do what we can to get as close as possible.
To serve God's people.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so another thing about legacy is that's what we focus on when we're doing a last will, living trust, or estate plan. And so if you have questions about that, contact our sponsor, Marquardt Law Firm. You can go to marquardtlawfirm.com, or you can call 210-530-4278 and learn more about wills, trusts, probate, estate planning. And it's something that we all need to do once we reach the age of 18. So any last words, Patricia, about the Raul Jimenez Thanksgiving Dinner?
Well, we're just very grateful. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. The listeners have been wonderful, and we just appreciate the community for continuing this wonderful tradition.
All right. So what's that number to text?
Yes, the text to give number is 210-972-5155, and then you will you text give to that, and you will receive some information on how to directly donate from your phone.
Okay. This is Todd Marquardt, Talk Law Radio. I'll talk to you later.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.